Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our MCPOM webinar on how to navigate the IEP process. I'm Larry Pasco, the president of MCPOM, and I'm really proud to present to you this program tonight and introduce tonight's speaker, Frances Schefter. She's dedicated her whole life to working with children with special needs. She started with an undergraduate degree in early childhood education from Towson University. After a few years of teaching regular and special education, she obtained a master's degree in special education from Florida International University. After spending 7 years in the classroom, moved to an administrative teaching position as the special education coordinator. Then she decided she wanted to make more of a difference in children's lives and decided that law school was the answer. So shortly after graduating from Stetson University College of Law, she opened her firm, Schefter Law PA, in Rockville, and she focuses on helping families have a stress-free IEP experience. And as one educator to another, as a former classroom teacher myself, who sat on IEP committees, worked with families and students on their IEP plans, I understand this is a really, really important part of the school experience, but it can be very stressful as a parent, and it can be very stressful as a teacher too. So tonight's discussion is to focus on the timelines that schools must follow during the special education process, how you start that process, and can you delay kindergarten, and what are the consequences? So again, we hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Please visit us at MCPOM.org for our other upcoming webinars and special programs. We are planning things throughout the summer, and especially if you're interested in getting to know us more or even volunteer with us, we welcome you. Please visit us at MCPOM.org. Email me at MCPOM@MCPOM.org, and especially let us know things you're interested in doing or learning from us in the future, because we do count this as part of our ongoing continuing education series. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Frances. And again, thank you for being with our members tonight and for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you, Larry. So as Larry said, my background is I was a teacher, decided to go to law school, and I wanted to share with you all today about the special education process. A lot of times what I've been finding is that schools don't necessarily follow the process correctly or the timelines, and parents don't always know that the schools aren't as forthcoming as they should be. I did a video one time on that when I was a teacher and special ed coordinator, I thought I was following all the laws and doing what we were supposed to be doing. However, once I went to law school, I realized, oh, those were school policies. They weren't necessarily the laws. So I don't think schools and teachers are being deceitful purposely, but sometimes they just don't know what the true law is. So for starting the special education process, the first thing is, if you as the parent are starting the process, you do a written request to the principal, and you specifically say that you want to start the special education process and that this letter is your consent for evaluations. Most times from that, the schools will come to the table within 30 days to discuss what your concerns are and whether they feel that evaluations are needed or not. I have had a lot of clients come to me way past this point and say, well, the school said they didn't think there was anything going on, so they didn't evaluate and we just went and paid for a private. The thing is, once you request the evaluation, you automatically fall under the umbrella of special education, and the school is required to give you your procedural safeguards and a PWN, which is a prior written notice, which I know it's not prior, but it's after the fact, to say why they're rejecting the evaluation. And they have to fully explain what they think and why they're rejecting it. If the school agrees to evaluate and you're going to move forward to evaluate, what happens is that you sign the consent to evaluate. Sometimes they'll do it at the meeting. Sometimes they'll do it, they'll send it to you. Now that we're doing everything on Zoom, they'll send it to you to electronically sign. And at that point, once you signed consent, they have 60 days to come to the table for that initial evaluation. And I told you earlier that the letter that you say, to put in the letter that this is your consent, because it technically starts the timeline. But if the school is being agreeable and doing the evaluation, you can give a little bit of leeway, but it's just letting them know that you understand the rules and you know the law and they need to follow the timelines. So once the evaluation is completed, they have the 60 days to come to the table to review the evaluation. And at this point, they're supposed to be reviewing all of the evaluation. Teachers are supposed to be giving input, reviewing report cards, any observations, parental input, and any other informal evaluations that might have happened. And at that point, we discuss whether the child is eligible for special education services or not. At this point, again, if the school says, nope, we don't think the child is eligible, they need to still provide you a PWN explaining fully why they feel your child is not eligible. If they find that the school feels that your child is not eligible and you disagree, there's two things that can go on here. If you're disagreeing with the evaluation and you don't feel the evaluation was done right, or that the conclusions that the evaluator came to is correct, you can ask for an independent education evaluation, also called an IEE. And this is that the school gives you an authorization to pay for your private evaluator. The school doesn't get to direct who's doing the evaluation. You, as the parent, go to a private evaluator with authorization. They do the evaluation, send it to you and the school then comes back together again to determine eligibility. When you ask for an IEE, there's two things that can happen. The school either needs to grant the authorization and give you the authorization, or they can file due process against you as the parent, saying that they stand by their evaluation, it's correct, and this is why it's correct. So those are the two things. Now, if they say your child's not eligible, that's it, we're not doing anything else, we're not giving the IE, you as the parent can also file for due process that you disagree with eligibility. Filing for due process entitles you're filing a court case basically with an administrative law judge, the Office of Hearing Office, and you'll start the process of due process. And that's you have 14 days to resolution meeting that you talk and you hopefully come up with a solution, or you actually go to hearing. And so that's filing the due process complaint. And then backing up, so you have at your eligibility meeting, that's when the school determines your child is not eligible. So the next step is if your school determines your child is eligible, you have the discussion of under what disability. There's a lot of times that there could be multiple disabilities. There could be attention deficit disorder going on, a speech delay, potentially a learning disability. Whatever the case may be, you discuss which you feel is the primary. Before the child is age 8, they can use developmentally delayed. And that's just kind of the catch-all. We're not quite sure what's going on, or if your child just needs a little bit of time to catch up. So developmental delay works. And then what happens with that is when your child is 7, you need to go through the evaluation process again to determine what is the appropriate identification. So the child's deemed eligible, the team agrees on what the eligibility code is. The school then has 30 days to have an IEP in place. And what that means is that the school, usually I say, if I'm at the meeting, at the eligibility meeting, I schedule the IEP meeting so that we have our timeline and we know when that IEP is going to be in place. So that's getting the process started and starting the IEP. Now for your regular IEP meeting, so that's for this IEP meeting or any school meeting, eligibility meeting, triennial review, annual review of an IEP, there are things that the timelines that the school needs to follow. The first thing is, if the school is scheduling a meeting, you are to have 10 calendar days written notice before the meeting. The school can't call you and say, oh yeah, we have a meeting scheduled for 2 days and you have to attend, or we're just going to do it without you. That's not acceptable. They have to give you 10-day notice, and then hopefully the school is going to work with you and agree if that time doesn't work. I see questions. If you have questions, jump them into chat. I'm totally fine. From my teaching days, I can jump over and go, unless, Alex, you want to come off mute and ask out early. Either way.
I just wanted to ask quickly, are the timelines that you're going over, are those federally established timelines, or do those vary state by state or LEA to LEA?
They are federal timelines. So what happens is that federally, IDEA is federal and sets the timelines. States can adjust the timelines, but they can't make them more. So federal law says 60 days to come to the table. States can say 45 days. They can't say 90 days. So with your IEP meetings before, so the 10 calendar days, that's federal set. The frustrating thing is the documents before the meeting. Federal law says reasonable time before the meeting, the parent should receive it. Maryland law, COMAR, says 5 days before the meeting, so, or reasonable time. So they always give the school the out of getting you the documents. But if the school does not give you the documents in advance in time for you to fully review, you can ask for the meeting to be rescheduled, or you can say, well, nope, give me a minute, I need to read this, and just hold up the IEP meeting. Because the reality is the parents can't meaningfully participate in an IEP meeting if you don't know what they're reviewing and talking about. And even with all of my degrees, a 15-page psychological with the psychologist going over real quick I'm not fully grasping everything that's going on. So it's not fair to you as the parent, and you can't fully meaningfully participate if you don't have the documents beforehand. So after the meeting, 5 days after the meeting is when you're supposed to get all of the documents. Federal law says you can actually get them at the meeting, but I've never had a Maryland school agree to give them to, they're like, we have 5 days to get this to you. And it's not really worth fighting. Let them do their thing and have the 5 days. After the 5 days is when you get the prior written notice again and the IEP. And again, review the PWN. This document is your case for everything. In the PWN, there's, prior written notice. So the prior written notice, the schools have to explain why they are rejecting whatever they're rejecting. So as I talked about before for initial evaluations, if the school says, nope, we don't think the child's eligible, we're saying no to initial evaluation, they need to give their reasoning why. If you're asking for a certain accommodation and the school says, nope, we don't do that, they need to give the reason why. They can't just say, no, we don't do that. And it has to be a legal reason why. Lack of funding is not legal. Schools get extra federal funding and they have to provide what the child needs. So a trick at an IEP meeting is if the school ever says no to something you're requesting, you can just say, can you make sure that's included in the PWN? A lot of times schools will think twice and will give you what they want because they know their reasoning for not giving you what your child needs is not a valid reason. And you asking for the PWN is that telling the school, you know what's going on. You're not going to let them slide by with this. So those are the basics on the timelines on the special ed process and the IEP. The next timeline is your eligibility. So triennial reviews are supposed to happen every 3 years. With our children that are younger, it happens more often. As I said before, developmental delay is a category that can happen until a child's 8th birthday, but then you need to have an evaluation to determine what the disability code should be. And so with the triennial review, if your evaluations due, like let's say they've done it May 2022, it's due 3 years from now. What needs to happen is you need to have a planning meeting. And the planning meeting is to discuss, is there still a disability and do we need to evaluate? a lot of times I've had schools say, oh, there's still a disability. We don't need to evaluate. We can just make the child eligible and do a new IEP. Well, yeah, but how are you getting current data for your present levels? And how do you know where the child is? I always strongly recommend pushing for a full comprehensive evaluation at least every 3 years. I also recommend it before a child goes to middle, transitions from elementary to middle or middle to high, because that's such a difference in how things are presented. And you really want to know what's going on with your child before you can make those determinations. Just because it's a triennial review doesn't mean you have to wait 3 years. If you've just had a review when your child's in 6th grade, but okay, 8th grade, they're going into 9th grade, you want to review an evaluation, parents can request an evaluation from the school. And it goes back again for parents to, if they refuse, they need to give you a PWN and why. So a full comprehensive evaluation usually includes an intellectual IQ score, achievement, academics, can include behavior, social, if that's an issue, and then whatever else your child receives. So if speech is an issue or handwriting, you can get a speech evaluation, an occupational therapy evaluation, a PT evaluation, whatever your child needs are the components you want to ask for. But the general, a full comprehensive is your IQ, your academic, and behavior. There are times where I'll say, we don't need to do the IQ because we know where the IQ is, and that's okay. So we just want to do the academics or behavior because those are the two that give us the best for planning, so forth. But when your children are under the age of 8, you want to do if your IQ has been done under the age of 8, you want an IQ above the age of 8. It's my understanding that at age 7 is when your IQ kind of solidifies. So there can be the difference. But again, it's looking at what information do you think you need to be able to develop an IEP? Like if you as the parent, we're going to put in present levels and determine goals, which are the whole steps that need to be going together. What evaluations do you need to make sure that your child is on track to access the general education curriculum? So that's that. The other timelines. The other thing I wanted to talk through with you all is delaying kindergarten due to immaturity. This has been a big one because what Montgomery County tends to do and Maryland tends to do is if you're delaying kindergarten, they try to treat your child as going to a private school and just giving speech services, which is not what's supposed to happen. Because in Maryland, Maryland law allows parents to delay kindergarten by 1 year for immaturity. So they don't have to be in a preschool. They don't have to be in, an accredited school. They can just be delayed for immaturity. If you're exerting your right, your Maryland state law right to delay kindergarten, that doesn't put the school district off the hook of following federal law. They still need to provide services to your child. I've battled Montgomery County with this, have not had to go to due process. They usually give in, but it's something to be aware of as parents that, again, don't always trust what the school is telling you, because just because that's the way they've always done it doesn't mean that's what it should be or that's what the law is. One of the things I say all the time is to educate yourself as parents. That's the most important thing. An educated parent walking into the IEP meeting, being empowered and knowing what you're arguing for is the best defense and the best you can do to advocate for your child, is knowing what's out there and knowing the rules. I love sitting in IEP meetings when the schools kind of underestimate me, and I get to pull out the federal law says, and then the schools kind of back off. I've had MCPS, Montgomery County Schools, their lawyers kind of step back a little bit, because I went, oh, okay, so if you guys don't do that, we'll get an independent educational evaluation. And then the lawyer's like, no, that's not what she meant. We do those evaluations. I'll make sure somebody from central office will make sure the evaluation's done. So it's just knowing those key buzzwords to say that can help advocate for your child and get what you want. Another thing that I often tell parents is just say, well, I was talking to a lawyer and she said, and see what happens. A lot of times schools will change their position if they know you're even thinking about talking to a lawyer. So that's another trick to do. Basically, and again, if you guys have any questions at all, even if it's not on these topics, feel free to ask, like, just go ahead and put them in there. Like if you've had a school tell you something, go ahead, Alex.
So, thanks. So
Sure.
I actually live in DC, but we're members of MCPOM.
Okay.
And so our twins are 2.5. They have been in DC Strong Start since almost birth, because they were preemies, and they've been in therapy. One twin got booted out of DC Strong Start because they said like, oh, everything's fine. That twin, I knew something was not right, or not quite right. And she then was diagnosed with autism. So we have our upcoming meeting with DCPS on Wednesday. So, and it's our first meeting to talk about whether or not they will find the girls eligible to start pre-K3 a year early. But what I just learned last week was that if I exercise my right to continue these meetings of exploring, if the girls can start school early, then I basically relinquish our right to our child continuing services through the state through DC Strong Start. And I was wondering, what the legality is of that. It seems strange, like at this point in time, I have to decide whether or not to relinquish that when I don't know if they'll accept my children early. And one twin has a confirmed diagnosis of autism. The other twin is being reevaluated because they said she has a lot of red flags, but not enough to give her a confirmed diagnosis, but also not enough to say that she's not. So Children's wanted to do a reevaluation, but the defined zone of like having to relinquish my right to extended care seems strange to me.
Right. So what they're talking about is when you're moving from Part C to Part B. So under the age of 3 is the IFSP, the Individual Family Student Program, I think is what it stands for. But that's the IFSP. So when your child turns 3, it's when you can choose to move to an IEP or stay in that zone of the IFSP, which is more of the providers teaching the parents how to do it, or the preschool how to provide the services, and how they help teach you how to help your children. Whereas an IEP is switching to the IEP. So you're not relinquishing any rights. It's just you need to determine whether you want your child to stay on an IFSP or you want your child to go into an IEP. And that's, DCPS is famous for that. I do a lot of work in DCPS also. I'm licensed in DC and Maryland. So that's what you need is look into. They should have the form, or you could probably Google it, of the difference between IFSP and IEP and which you want, whether you want the direct services or not. And so you're not relinquishing any rights, you're just switching to the IEP, and they still have to provide services. It's just how are they going to provide those services, through an IEP or through the IFSP? So I don't know how, I don't know how,
What I mean is that, yes, I understand that transition of the plan, but they are saying that if I select to change to an IEP so that they can transition into DCPS, that action in itself, if DCPS or if early stages evaluates them and does not find them eligible, then we cannot roll back into DC Strong Start, and then they are without services for that year, that year of gap before they can, try to lottery into school.
I'm not sure why. So at the meeting, it should be that you're discussing whether they're eligible for an IEP and you can make the choice. I'm not sure how they're saying that if you're not sure if they're eligible, if you can make a choice or not. Because the whole idea is they're eligible, but they're passing it over to early stages. Honestly, if your child qualifies for Strong Start, they'll qualify for early stages. And if the school tries to not qualify, that's a due process complaint, automatically going back. I don't see how they can then say your child's no longer eligible if you're seeing all these delays. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Monica, I think you were next.
Thanks. Hi. Thank you so much. This is so timely because we actually have our IEP meeting on Wednesday. So a quick overview, and I know, I don't want to take everybody's time up with my individual case, but I think it might be relevant to many because my boys are in kindergarten or rising kindergarten, of course, repeating. So to your point earlier about the Maryland law allowing repeats, that's good. Sorry, and I shouldn't say repeating. They were in a private kindergarten and now they're going to go to public kindergarten. And so we did through the Child Find program. And they call it like the private school program or the, religious school or something like that. But what ended up happening was that, they route it to your local elementary school. And only one of my twins is really impacted. And I had, with my whole package, submitted private assessments on speech, OT, psych, including an official diagnosis. And then the school then repeated, or they did their own evaluations and sent us copies way ahead of time, which was great, so that we have all the information we need for our call on Wednesday. But what I'm wondering is that even though we'd submitted a private eval for OT, for instance, that wasn't something that they included in the comprehensive review. We only got a review for kind of the, we got a psych review, we got a speech review, and we got a psych speech, and there was one other that I can't remember. Just general education, I guess, something like that. So the question I have is, if we have this meeting on Wednesday, and the OT wasn't part of the conversation, even though we'd asked about it and stuff, what is the likelihood of having some sort of OT component added now? And what are your thoughts on how to include OT? Because I'd also heard that it's virtually impossible in MCPS to get OT support unless the child has really severe needs.
So the OT support needs to prove that there's an educational impact. Your private evaluation is 100% needs to be brought up and included in that meeting to determine eligibility. They should have told you if they did any, usually what MCPS will do, will have an OT come out and do an informal assessment to see if it's impacting. If they didn't do that, at the next meeting, you can still request that they do it. The key is to look at the private evaluation and determine how it is impacting their access to the general education curriculum. And those are the key words, is because MCPS will try to say, oh, it's a home issue, that it's not impacting their education. The teacher understands them, that teacher can understand the handwriting. The teacher can understand that it's not making it difficult. So the arguments you want to make is that, yes, it's impacting their access to the general education curriculum, and they need direct instruction. Like, those are the buzzwords you need to use to try and get services.
I literally wrote them down as fast as I possibly could. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. And again, great timing. I could not believe it when I saw this meeting.
Right. Perfect. Carla.
Hi. So I sort of had two questions. Both of my twins have had IEPs since they were 3. We've had no problem with the county as far as I know, until listening to you. One twin has, after a bit of a fight, we got him an OHI diagnosis with Montgomery County. Is that good? Will that last him? My concern is that they're going to say my kids are fine and kick them out of the IEP program. And so will OHI last him until I think that he's ready to not need services anymore?
So yes, I mean, OHI 100% can last. It's developmentally delayed is the only one that can only last, that has a time limit, basically.
Okay.
Everything else, it's just, again, the buzzwords are, is it impacting the access to the general education curriculum? The idea is that an IEP needs to even the playing field between the children that needs the special assistance and the general education students, not give them a leg up, it's just to even it. And so it's just, the buzzwords are to prove that the OHI, is it ADHD?
It's ADHD, yeah.
ADHD, that's the usual for OHI, is that it's impacting the general education curriculum. One of the things I like to use is they say, well, he's getting good grades. Okay, fine. But when he's staring out the window and not staying focused, he's not fully available for learning. And that's why he still needs services. And that's one that usually helps get the school team over the hump of him needing services. The disability code does not determine, they can't say, oh, he's ADHD, the ADHD has gone away. They can't say, oh, he's on medication, he's doing fine now, we don't need it. The argument there is, yes, he's doing fine because he has the IEP and the supports in place. And those are the arguments. And then it's, if they try to dismiss, it's, you ask for the complete evaluation. If the evaluation comes back trying to dismiss, you ask for the independent educational evaluation. Under no circumstances do you agree to dismiss the IEP until you're ready to and you feel.
Okay, well, because it's he's a weird case because he's a good kid. So, you know, they don't see the problem, but we went up to Kennedy Krieger and Kennedy Krieger saw the problem. So he was in it under speech, and they gave us a little bit of a fight because they're like, oh, well, he doesn't need ADHD services. He just needs these speech services that he's been receiving since he was 3. I'm like, yeah, but he's gonna time out of speech because he's almost there. So he's gonna need this additional help that you guys aren't seeing. And luckily the team at our school is great. And they're like, okay, you know, it became a bit of a thing, but we got it done to have the OHI put on there. But I was just worried about that, like them fighting me because like, he's a good kid, he's doing fine. Yes, but like, I can't get homework done because by the time he gets home, it's done. Life is done, you know?
And so, that's an argument that you can also use. I use that to get a child in 11th grade, an IEP, an initial IEP, is that he's keeping it so together at school, and then he falls apart at home. That he needs that extra support at school so that he can not be under so much pressure at school. Like, he gets the support he needs at school, then he can transition to home and be able to do the homework.
Yeah,
does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, no, I mean, we got lucky this year because I put my twins in the same class due to COVID. And this teacher coincidentally has a dual degree in special ed and general ed. So she was like, it was purely coincidental, perfect teacher for the year back. but next year I'm going to get the old biddy who's like, oh, he's just like not paying attention, or he's, whatever. And I'm concerned about, she has like a calming corner for the kids and all of these like really cool things, but that might not last next year. So I'm, worried where that goes.
Make sure you get those things put on the IEP.
Okay.
That he needs a calming corner, that he needs that, because if you get it on the IEP, the next teacher has to do it.
Okay.
And one thing that you brought up is that getting the OHI, your disability code does not make what services are needed. So for example, my daughter has an IEP for just speech. However, she has behavior issues when she can't communicate. She gets frustrated. She needs a stuffed animal or a corner, or she goes under her desk, whatever it is, she has her quiet space. So just because she's only speech doesn't mean we can't have these behavior goals there of giving her the support she needs to be successful.
So that's good to know, because I fought for the different diagnostic codes thinking that we were going to time out of speech and then we wouldn't get those services as he gets. My twins are 7, so they're still young. They're first grade. So this is their first year in school, because last year we were obviously out. So big transition.
Yes.
But the other
mine's in second grade, so I know. I got it.
Yeah, the other question I had, and I didn't even know this was a problem until you brought it up. As I said, they're 7. My other twin is ADHD and autism, diagnosed at Kennedy Krieger. They gave her developmental delay. Why would they do that if she's going to time out of that next year? Like, that seems like a weird choice to put in there.
I don't know why they do that, but they do it.
So that's not something I should be worried about. So when they do it next year, they'll give it whatever it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And then you just need to decide which is more prevalent, because they won't give both. So they'll either do the autism or they'll do the OHI for ADHD. So what I usually say, look at, you can get goals and accommodations for both, but what you want is what's more prevalent. I can't say the word tonight. Like what's coming out more and what the profile looks like more.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Definitely, yeah. They're definitely fighting her ADHD hard in class, because she is the boy type of ADHD that likes to bounce off the walls and not hold still and constantly talking, constantly everywhere. So despite using medication, she's still off the reservation half the time. It's just who she is. So yeah, but they didn't realize that developmental thing was a thing. But her IEP is like 20 pages long. Like, they have so many things on her. I was very impressed. None of it we had to ask for. They supplied everything, including like the lunch bunch to help her with social interactions.
Oh,
and
wow.
like they supplied a ton for her, which was interesting that they didn't supply as much for my son, because again, they're polar opposites. She's hyper and everywhere, and you can see her issues. He's the one who sits in the corner. So they didn't, he kind of got overrun by her.
Got it.
So I'm hoping that when they're separated next year, they'll be able to look at him more as an individual and not as part of the set.
Right.
But that was my question. So in theory, next year when we meet with them, is it yearly then? We meet with them in the spring again, or they meet with the fall? So
it's annual that you have the IEP review, but depending on when the children's birthday is, they might do it earlier.
Okay. Well, because in theory, we have to change out the developmental delay marker on there
before their 8th birthday.
Before their 8th birthday, because they're February. So I guess we'll have to have a meeting in January then to change out the developmental delay.
Correct.
Okay.
In theory.
I got to
my daughter's wasn't changed until like a month after, because it just the way the timing felt. And it's, like, obviously the school knows what I do for a living, and is it worth fighting it? What, does it matter? No, she still has the IEP. We can change it a month later. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
So,
because that's just what I had. Because so far we're impressed, there's no complaints at all about the school. By the way, if anybody, it's Diamond Elementary. If anybody wants to move up to Gaithersburg, we fell into this coincidentally, but they have been wonderful. Because I hear all these horror stories.
One thing I will say about that though, is as long as the principal doesn't change.
Yeah, I'm concerned about their case manager changing. That's why I'm like, I need to know exactly what's happening here, because if I lose this case manager, then who knows, who comes in next year to take over.
Case managers and principals drive everything.
That's why I was very concerned about getting this right the first time when the team is so good. Because if
Exactly.
I lose this team, what happens next year? I don't know.
Right.
But
Good
yes,
call.
that was my thing. But thank you. So you cleared that
No
up, because that
problem.
was my concern with those two. The diagnostic codes were a little wonky in my brain.
Got it. All right, Claudia. And then-
Hi,
Hi.
thank you so much for all this information. It's very, very helpful. I'm actually at the very early stages right now. My children, I got girls, twins, they're 3. And right now they are attending the child development program at Rockville High School. So they only go for like 2.5 hours. I noticed that they are very hyperactive, and I believe they're gonna probably be having ADHD.
ADC.
Yeah. So I started the process with Child Find. I sent all the paperwork, the teacher's questionnaire, all the stuff. So I'm just kind of trying to understand, like, what should I be expecting or asking or requesting from them. If like I said, I'm very new to this, and I have an older child, but I didn't have these events with him.
I mean, it's asking for the initial evaluation, and until you get the evaluation report, it's hard to say what your child will need. It's just making sure you read the evaluation report and understand it. Ask questions. Ask questions at the meeting to make sure you fully understand what's going on and what they're explaining, so that you can make sure the right services are in place. Asking for it's a comprehensive evaluation. If they've already done the teacher questionnaires, the home questionnaires, I'm sure they've done the IQ, and they'll do the academic as well.
Okay.
There's also, I'm going to put, I'll have to pull the other one up also. I have a YouTube channel. I think it was in my bio, and there is an interview with a neuropsychologist explaining what the scores mean in evaluations. That would definitely be helpful.
Okay.
So you can understand what you're reading.
And another thing was like that also, it's kind of like a double whammy, because my girls are actually September 1st. So they're right at the cutoff of MCPS. So I'm afraid that because of that, they will get into kindergarten, but they're going to be the youngest out of all of them. And I can already see, when I see them in the class, they're not far behind, but I mean, the kids are coloring within the lines and everything, and they're not, and, they can't sit down quiet during story time. They move around a lot. And, it's all that.
I would probably delay kindergarten for immaturity and make them give you the other year of PEP services.
We actually don't have PEP services. They're like I said, this is I just put the
Got it.
paperwork maybe 3 weeks ago for Child Find, so I'm still waiting for that call from the people from there. They say
Start squeaking. 3 weeks
Okay.
ago, if you haven't gotten the call for the evaluation yet, start becoming the squeaky wheel. Keep calling and asking, because they will keep putting it off because of summer, and legally they can't do that.
Okay, so how like long should I hear back from them on a more or less like I don't know, like timeline?
I mean, it should be a couple of weeks until they get you on the schedule. I mean, legally, they're supposed to have it within 60 days and coming, like the evaluation done and the report done within 60 days. So if 3 weeks in, you haven't gotten anything, I would be calling every couple of days.
Okay, yeah, I just put the paperwork and like I said, just 3 weeks ago. So I like that's why I didn't know what to expect. So
Yeah, no,
but
start
thank you.
calling. Start calling this week.
Okay, great. I'll do
Okay.
that definitely.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
sure. Elizabeth?
Oh, this is gonna be a minute, so, all right. I have twins. I have boy-girl twins. We'll start with the girl first because she's the least issues. Gabby, my twins are 6, boy-girl. They're turning 7 June 4th. Gabby attends private school, Catholic school. What are their protocols, or what do they have to do? And I say this because she was in infants and toddlers, went to PEP, did the pre-stuff, did schooling. They know she had a speech like impediment / delay. She's been diagnosed ADHD this year. what accommodations can I ask for, or do they have to give me because of this? I know that there's a difference between IEPs, 504s. I haven't even got there yet, but the school has been very accommodating. She's in the sits in the front of the class. She's got her glasses. They're aware. The teacher is like on point, aware of this, but I just want to know for next year, what can I ask for that I may have not seen or haven't even thought of in terms of private education as to accommodations?
So private schools are not required to follow IDEA.
Okay.
It's only public schools. And if they do not receive any federal funding, they don't have to follow 504 either. They do have to follow the American Disabilities Act. So with ADA, they need to give reasonable accommodations. Those would be, a ramp for a child with a wheelchair or an interpreter potentially. It's a little bit harder. Some schools are better than others. I've had a lot of families had to leave their private schools because the child wasn't doing well and needed extra accommodations, and the school will only go so far, unfortunately, but they're not legally required to do any of it. So depending on where your child is, sometimes they would do better in a public school or a different type of private school that gears more towards our special needs children.
Yeah, luckily for her, hers is she's just a social butterfly, and she's that kid you're allowed to constantly say, sit down, stop moving, stop fidgeting. She's that. All right, now to twin number 2. So with Christian, we've always known he was delayed. We just knew. 2, he was diagnosed with Kennedy Krieger. At 3, ever since then, we've been on point. Speech therapy, OT therapy, PT, everything that you could possibly think of. I had the insurance that I pay for it for him to make sure he gets all his stuff is insane. Not just talking about Kennedy Krieger, but just private places and whatnot. So COVID hit. And that's where this is where my problem starts. When COVID hit, my husband and I were considered essential employees, and we were able to send our kids to the whole free daycare for children. It was such a small class. My son was the only autistic child, and he was amazing there. No issues. He paid attention. COVID hit for kindergarten. They decided it was going to be virtual. Virtual was a joke in Montgomery County, especially for an autistic child that is expected to just sit there. We have video that shows that it was basically putting a YouTube video on and then, oh, you guys did really good. Let's do another YouTube video. That we basically essentially pulled our son out of school. He was still considered a student, but we were like, this isn't going to work for us. We're just going to go ahead and send him to Verbal Beginnings in Columbia. So he can do 8 hours of ABA every day. And he did that from January until like a week before school started last year. So he pretty much did it almost like a full year.
Mm-hmm.
My problem or my concern and my issue is this. First grade started, I thought about holding him back. I was just like, but everybody had developmental. He started biting his hand and stimming and having all these things because of the virtual headache. So when school went back and started again, we got him off of the ABA because of the timing. But he started just doing speech therapy a couple months ago again because of the in-person situation. And what the issue is that our teacher this year for Christian, we did the same Learning Center module he had done before when he was 4. We did it in kindergarten, but that doesn't really count because it was virtual. Now we're in first grade. The Learning Center module does not work for him. The teacher I have for him is an ex-substitute teacher. This is his first year teaching as a full-time teacher, which automatically has me like, okay, you don't know anything about what you're doing. I'm sorry. I don't know if you did it or a substitute for 1 day a week, 1 week a year. I have no idea. So I'm already hesitant. Great guy. You're just not teaching my son anything.
Right.
There's no homework for him compared to what my daughter has. I see the differences between private and public, and it's astounding the differences.
Mm-hmm.
With him, we did the IEP in November, but they didn't have enough information because he had missed school because of a gastrointestinal thing. Had another IEP in February. Am I allowed to record any part of that IEP?
You just have to notify them in advance that you want to record the IEP meeting, because then the school will record it as well.
Okay. That was one of the questions I had.
Yep.
So with him, other than the regression, we don't know what he can do. He cannot hold a pencil. He cannot hold a pen. I don't know what they're teaching him. I have honestly no idea. We did the IEP. I recorded it. I don't remember if I told him or not, but I recorded it just to give my husband like a, hey, this is what happened. And, you know, I asked, okay, so when you read a book to him or read a book and you want him to understand the concept of Three Little Pigs, are you just reading it? Oh yeah, we read it every day for 5 days. That's nice. Are you doing a YouTube video? Are you doing some kind of text, you know, tactile thing or sensory thing? No, we just do it different ways. I'm like, do you have a place where he can go decompress if he's stimming? Do you have a vest? Does he have headphones? Does he have a PEX tablet? I'm not getting any of that information, or it's just like, oh yeah, we have that available. So I'm not confident in my son's school and his teacher. That 2 weeks ago, I ran into Superintendent McKnight at one of her community events, that when I had to speak and she happened to be next to me, I was in tears telling her, I just want my son to be educated. And my issue is with them is that they're trying to veer him towards a certificate program versus a diploma program. So you already see where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So what happened is they ended up calling the ombudsman to come over to speak to me. The ombudsman came and talked to me. He was supposed to get back to me on Monday last week. It's been a week. Today's Monday. And I was thinking to myself, okay, did I put the wrong date? But my issue is I'm currently fighting with the school, and I do not have the finances to be able to hire someone as yourself or a lawyer. Is it possible? I know it's going to be hard, but is it possible for me to do anything that I need to do to get him into either Ivy Mount, Sandberg, any of the other schools, because this school is not doing it for him? Is that something that I can do personally, or do I have to have someone with me for that?
To get a child into Ivy Mount, which is a non-public, I don't know if it's ever been done without having an attorney or an advocate with a parent. Can it be done? Yes. It's not often, because remember, that's pulling on the purse strings. It's what you have to prove to get to a non-public placement is that that he is not progressing at all or minimal. If there's been regression because of COVID, the IEP team was supposed to have a meeting, and that's for everybody. All IEP teams were supposed to meet at the beginning of this year when we came back in person to see if there was regression during COVID. And if there was regression or lack of progress towards IEP goals, there needed to be a plan put in place of what the school is going to do to bring the child back up to where the child would have been without the regression.
No, so, say my son being diagnosed. My son was diagnosed at 2 years old, so they had an idea of what his issues were. And what ends up happening is that I honestly don't know what they're teaching him. We did our own testing at Kennedy Krieger for 5 hours last week that, you know, my insurance is paying for, and I got the little standard statement. It could be possible it's $5,000 that my insurance is being charged for this. I asked the school, what testing have you done? Oh, we've done this, but if you want to get them into private placement, we're going to have to ask for a, we're going to have to have a meeting for that and get everything together for that. And I'm like, okay, that was like 6 weeks ago.
So the process for getting into a non-public is that the IEP team needs to meet and discuss placement. And if he is not making progress, if it is not working where he is, then the school team determines that he needs a more restrictive environment, and the referral gets sent to the CIEP office, which is the central IEP team. And they have 30 days from when they get the evaluation, the packet, to meet with you to discuss other options. I rolled my eyes when I said 30 days, because technically when an IEP team determines that a more restrictive environment is necessary, it should be happening. That MCPS has this other team that you have to meet with because they're the ones that know other placements, is kind of not as, it's not following the law as clearly, but I do have to say it's better than DC, because DC does their central office and they don't even include the parents in the meeting. So it takes a little bit longer with MCPS, but that's basically the process. And then once you get to the CIEP team meeting, that's when you're discussing a non-public placement.
Okay, because the issue we had was that I didn't like the wording that was used, such as his performing on demand was not a thing. And I'm like, okay, he's not going to. He's not a trained SEAL, and he's autistic. He's completely different. But what's interesting is I keep telling them, Christian is reading at like a 4th grade level. Why haven't we tested him to see if he's able to understand the context of that? And I'm having issues with them. So I have no idea what testing he's gotten done at school. And I get the IEP, and I'm not going to lie, 20 pages. I think our IEP is like 40 pages. To have to understand all that, it becomes a blur after a while.
Yeah.
But that's my issue. And I think, and when I told them, and they've known, because I make it very evident every time, I do not want him to be in a certificate program. He is going to get a diploma. And you can see automatically either the change in the reaction or we'll talk about that when the time comes. And as you said, that there's federal money for accommodations. They were like, well, he needs his own like person to be with him, because you only have the para and the teacher. But because of the federal regulations and because of the learning issues that the government has given us the opportunity to have another teacher in the classroom. And I was like, okay, are you trying to tell me like I won the lottery, or is this something that was supposed to be? So they're trying to sweet talk it like it's some big thing. And I'm like, no, that's just because now you have the money. Now you can say, I'm going to hire this person to be this, So I just want to know where I'm at.
You need to flip those words on them, because if they say he needs a dedicated aide, they get federal funding for that, and they have to provide it. None of this teacher, an additional teacher in the classroom. No, you guys just said he needed a dedicated aide. You all need to give him a dedicated aide, not an extra adult support, a dedicated aide.
Got it. Thank you.
And they cannot use, that is, case law is clear on that. Schools cannot say, well, we don't have the funding to provide that. Sorry, BS. That's what you get the federal funding for. That's the whole point.
Okay, thank you.
I am going to put a link in the chat for you guys. Actually, you know what? I'll email it to you all. I have a couple of links. I'm going to send you the link to my YouTube channel so that you can subscribe to get the videos. I do 3-minute videos, and then I have the longer podcast, the interview videos with just little tidbits about IEPs, the process, anything you need to know so that you can educate yourselves. And then I'm going to also email the link to my website for the free PDFs that I have. I have one PDF is on the acronyms, one is on extended school year appropriateness. I also have what to look for in IEP goals to make sure they're appropriate, SMART goals. And I have the procedural safeguards on one page. So a basic summary of what you need to know your procedural safeguards are. I think we're scheduled for 8. I don't know if, I'm fine if we need to go farther, if anybody else has any other questions or general topics they want to ask. Anybody else?
I guess I can continue with mine. With the ombudsman, am I supposed to treat this person as though they're with me or with the school?
So the ombudsman is an independent.
Okay.
The whole idea of the ombudsman is that they try to resolve issues before they become real issues. So it's an independent.
Okay.
Monica, did you have a question? I know you came off mute.
No, I was just coming off to say thank you. I want to be respectful of your time, but this was incredibly helpful. And like I said, strangely perfectly timed, given that our meeting's in 2 days. So, super helpful. And I can't wait to take a look at your link and everything. But I don't know who from the MCPOM team planned this, but this was very, very great.
Miriam did.
Okay. Well, I hope you come back every year, because I'm sure I'll have new questions next year.
I am more than happy to. And, like, as I usually say, sorry, I'm just taking a picture of your names real quick, just so I have who attended. I always say I'm always open for questions. And then just to let you all know, I have something new that I just started 2 weeks ago, a subscription service. And basically what the subscription service is, you sign up for an annual subscription. There's the basic plan, which is just basically unlimited access to me of quick questions, a quick email of like, hey, the school said no to this. Is that right? Plus advanced registration for any webinars that I do, if I ever start charging free and so forth. The second one is is the same subscription plan, but also having an annual review IEP meeting that my advocate will attend. So I'm an attorney and an advocate, but I also have an advocate on staff. So if it's just an annual review and you don't think it's going to be too much of a fight, the advocate can go with you. And then the third level is that I attend the IEP meeting with you. So an attorney attends, prepares you for, and that of course is reviewing all the documents, meeting with you before the meeting, attending the meeting, and then after the meeting. So that's something that you might want to consider, because what I say is like, you basically have an attorney in your back pocket, and the relief I know that it can be for parents of knowing that I don't have to know all this, you know, I can send a quick email and find out if it's true or not. It's just reduces stress a lot, knowing that you don't have to worry about it. So I want to provide you with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No
This is
problem.
helpful.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.